Asian Development Bank is raising its growth forecast for the region. It says Asia, excluding Japan, will grow 7.8% this year, faster than a September estimate of 7.3%. To talk more about the report and its recommendations for policymakers, with us is Joseph Zveglich, Assistant Chief Economist at Asian Development Bank. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's some growth rate, isn't it?
Indeed. But keep in mind, this is coming off of very high growth rates from last year of 9%. So it's in fact somewhat of a moderation to more normal growth rates that we can expect looking ahead.
There are challenges, though. It's not all plain sailing, is it?
Indeed. And we see on the immediate horizon, the biggest challenge is going to be handling the inflationary pressures that are building up. As the economies have moved back towards their potential output, and in fact, in some cases, moving beyond their potential output, as well as getting hit from the outside of this external shock on oil and food prices, we're calling for policymakers in the region to get ahead of the curve on inflation.
Which China did do yesterday, taking many by surprise.
Indeed, but then there's also the question of getting the mix of policies right, so that there's a consistency. And in China, the raising of interest rates may also very well attract further foreign flows, which would put, again, further inflationary pressures on them. So in addition to the mix of monetary tightening, they may also need to look at a more flexible appreciation of the yuan.
Of course. And capital controls as well, or coordinated capital controls. Is that one of the other measures necessary, not just for China, but for other nations?
Well, for the capital controls, this would be in a case where if they haven't been running persistent current account surpluses, if the exchange rate is more or less in line with fundamentals, then to avoid that shock of having an exchange rate movement, the shock that it would have on the export sector, there, in a very limited case, capital controls could be considered.
Which countries are behind the curve? You say it's important for countries to get ahead of the curve and deal with inflation. Which countries concern you the most in the region?
Well, in fact, many of the countries that are already starting to get towards their potential growth rate or beyond have already started taking preliminary actions raising interest rates. If we looked at, for example, the newly industrialized economies, that they have achieved very rapid growth. China as well has achieved very rapid growth. And so we feel that the policymakers are well aware of these steps. But if we look at the interest rates, in many cases, they're still below the levels that we had seen before the crisis. So not quite yet normalized monetary
China,
policy.
of course, has to transform its pattern of economic growth. Are you confident now that measures are being implemented to achieve those ends?
Well, certainly, if we look at the time of the recovery, there was quite a strong surge coming from domestic demand, both consumption and investment. This is a good sign, although it's not yet clear enough to say that this means that rebalancing has been achieved. We feel that a lot of the rebalancing we're seeing in terms of the current account is coming more from external prices and the short-term soft demand. There's still going to be quite a lot that needs to be done in terms of the structural changes in order to make the boost in domestic demand more sustained.
And in your report, you highlight the importance of South-South links, saying that it'll drive not just Asian growth, but global growth.
Indeed. If we look at the trends, South-South has certainly been on the rise. But in the current environment where we're expecting the growth in the north to be much softer, here is a good opportunity to achieve greater rates of growth. And in fact, it's something that's been overlooked in the past.
Joseph, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Joseph Zveglich there, joining us from the Asian Development Bank.